Okay. I think most people are here, so I think we're about to get started. Just so everybody knows, we're streaming live, so people were watching you eat pizza on the internet. So that's the thing now. You're on the internet eating pizza. So who's first up? Saeed's first up. So actually, before I get started, I would say a few things. All right. If everybody back there eating pizza wants to come up forward and have a seat, we can get started. Yeah, thanks for coming out tonight. I know it's super nice outside, and there's probably a lot of other things to be done during this nice weather, but thanks for coming and listening to our speakers. Tonight's talk is going to be lightning talk, so normally we do one larger talk about a larger subject. Tonight's going to be 3 lightning talks about 3 different subjects, got a really high level, so ask a lot of questions. I'm sure everyone's ready for tons of questions, and if they're not, that's fun too. They'll be on the internet recorded, not knowing the answer. So yeah, we are still looking for something for next month, so if anybody has any ideas, suggestions, or knows somebody who might want to give a talk, feel free to hit me up anytime here. I'm also easy to find on the internet. You can find me or an email at eugenewebdevs.com as well. So I think everyone's here, so let's just get started. Our first speaker is Saeed. If you want to come up. Everybody give it up for Saeed. And why don't you tell us about your talk?
Cool. Hey guys, how's it going? No. No. Oh, yeah, that might help. Okay. All right, so today I'm going to be, the title of my talk is Generating Hundreds of Tests with Less Code. It's going to be a quick intro into a subject called property-based testing. So my name is Saeed. I'm a software developer with a testing focus. So my day-to-day job is pretty much trying to find as many problems in software before customers do. I just happen to know how to write code, so a lot of my time is based in building automation testing frameworks and automating things throughout the web browser. So if you guys want to get the links or to the slides about this talk, you can hit up my website, saeedgatson.com/pbt-talk. So I'm sure most of us are familiar with example-based testing. It's mostly what people use for all of their unit testing when they have their expected versus their actual. But while researching this talk, I came across an analogy that I could definitely relate to, and I'm sure many of you can relate to also. So for those of you who don't know, I have a 2-year-old at home. As of this month, this year, she turns 2. Thank you. And I've been preparing myself for an important conversation that I'm sure we'll have in the near future within the next couple of years or so, and I'm sure you guys have had this conversation as well, and it is the conversation about cleaning your room. So I want you guys to imagine a messy 2-year-old room, all the toys all over the place, books, different puzzles, trash. And for most of us, I want you to think about some questions that you would ask to try to verify whether or not the room has been cleaned by your toddler. So most of us will come up with questions like, are all the blocks put away? Have you picked up your puzzle pieces? Have you thrown away all of your trash? And these are the same types of questions that we would ask of our functions when we do example-based testing. We always have our expected versus our actual. But the problem with these types of questions is that they don't scale. So even if the blocks are put away, what if the race cars aren't put away? And even if the race cars aren't put away, what if all the books aren't put up in the shelf? These types of questions don't really scale for our unit test, and they don't really scale in our scenario for a clean room. And this is the type of problem that property-based testing tries to solve. So property-based testing is a check against rules that hold true in every single case. So a property of a clean room in our scenario with the toddler would be, are all the toys placed in the correct bin? You could also ask, is all the garbage placed in the trash? Or is the ground completely clean and clear? See, these are examples of things that are always true in every case. And once we have these properties in place and set up, then regardless of the items that are in the room, we can always verify that it's clean. So at that point in our unit test, once we have these properties fit up, we can generate random input to go against these properties and generate hundreds of tests and test them there. So for most programming languages out there, there's different types of frameworks that will help you with property-based testing. So it all started with a framework called QuickCheck, which was built for Haskell. And what QuickCheck allowed you to do was generate tons of different random inputs and point those against your unit test. So it also, at the same time, once it found an error in your test based on this random generated input, it would start doing a process called shrinking, which would then slowly narrow down your input to find the most counterintuitive scenario or a solution or a set of inputs that failed your test. So, for example, let's say that you were trying to generate integers, and for some reason your test failed after an integer that's higher than 100. But in this case, the random generated number was 1,000. What would happen is that your framework would then try to narrow it down to find that one case, which in this case would be 100, and cause a failure. So if you're trying to look for a property framework for your language, you can pretty much Google just your language with property-based testing, and it will come up. For JavaScript, there's JS Verify. For Python, there's Hypothesis. And if you're in a .NET environment, there is fcheck. So as you can imagine, finding these problems is by far the hardest part. But once you have heard or have thought of a few examples, it becomes a little bit easier. So that's going to be the next point that I cover in the majority of this talk. I'm going to try to go over 5 different patterns or properties that you could then use to hopefully get you started with property-based testing. The first pattern is called reversible. So this is when a process has an opposite that will get you back to your starting variable or your starting values. So a good example of this would be encoding and decoding. Let's say you have something that you're going to be encoding to JSON. If you then have a method that also decodes, you can use that to verify that you end up with the starting variable after you encode. The next pattern is the more things change, the more is the same. So with this pattern, doing the same operation twice ends up with the same result. So a good example of this is trying to sort a list. Once you've sorted a list and then you run the sorting algorithm against it again, you end up with the same result. So this is another good way to find a property that's always true, just sorting something twice and then verifying that things don't change. The third pattern is some things never change. So this is a test for statefulness. So with this property, you just verify that something doesn't change. And a good example would be a collection. So say you had a process that ran against a collection, and you're not expecting the size of that collection to change. That would then be a good thing to test that is always true. Another example would be with the depth or a height of a tree. If you have a balanced tree in this case, you can run your process against the tree and then try to verify that the height or the depth hasn't changed. Oh, double skipped. So the fourth pattern is no explosions. So this pattern could be used in pretty much any function that you're trying to test, and this is just trying to verify that once your process is ran, things don't blow up. So this is a good way to kind of make sure that your code stays stable, and it's also a good way to find bugs a lot of security bugs can come up and edge cases can come up once you have this in place. Oops. So the fifth pattern is leave it alone. And this is when you have another process that you can then use to verify. So this is really good when you're trying to optimize something. So say you already have a system in place that does what you want to do, but it's just not running as fast as you like. Once you then have the optimized version, you can run the same set of inputs through both and then do the verification there. You can also do the same with the legacy system where you're trying to recreate or refactor some old code. You can then go through and put the same inputs through both sets and then use that as a verification of something that's always true. So of course, property-based testing isn't a silver bullet. Just because you're generating hundreds of tests due to this random data doesn't mean that you're going to find every single case. Some of the bad is that since it's random, you still might end up missing some cases due to just a certain endpoint not being generated at the beginning of your testing. It can also be really difficult in certain situations to come up with these properties for your functions. Sometimes the shoe just doesn't fit and then you'll have to test out your code in a different way. But some of the good things, some of the benefits of doing this is that with property-based testing, the amount of tests that you can actually generate using random data is only limited by power and time. So as long as you can sit there and have the code running and you have enough processing power to kind of go, you can generate thousands, even hundreds of tests. Another benefit is like actually going through that process of trying to identify properties with your functions, things that are always true, is that you end up understanding the business logic and the rules of the program or application that you're trying to build. You start to gain a better understanding about what you're trying to do. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in that case. So I would encourage you guys to kind of jump right in, give it a try. I was testing this over the weekend, and something that I found was really helpful for me was to take some existing unit tests that I have and kind of isolating those, moving those over to a different area or to their own class. And then for all of the inputs that I didn't really care about, that weren't critical to the test, having those just start to use random data is something that you can do quickly, and you might even flesh out some edge cases just doing that. And then as time goes on, you can continue to try to identify some more properties within your unit test and start to use that as a generator. So if you'd like to know more, feel free to hit me up, ask any questions. A lot of what I talked about today has been outlined in some blog posts and other talks that I've found online. So on the same page where you can get the slides, I have a list of just the resources of everything that I use to kind of understand more about this topic, and it's a good place to kind of get a start and learn more. So thank you guys. Is there any questions or anyone have anything they want to bring up? Yeah, sure.
You mentioned getting fake data. Where's a good place to get fake data?
Yeah, so a good place to get fake data would be actually using those frameworks that are outlined for your language. A lot of those have different tools and methods that would just generate data for you. You can either set out the data based on the type of input, or a lot of them will allow you to build custom objects based off of other classes or things that you want. So a lot of them are really flexible. I think that would be a good place to kind of start. Mm-hmm. For .NET, the name is FSCheck. Yeah, so it was originally built for F#, but there's been tools that kind of expand that out to VB and also C#. Mm-hmm.
This is like additional on top of the unit test, right? You're not talking about integration test or any state-driven test.
Yeah, I would. Oh, okay. The question was, is this mainly used for unit tests? Would you recommend using this for integration tests or a higher level test? To me, I would find the best bang for buck would probably be at unit test. You might also be able to get some benefit maybe at like an API level, but it's difficult to do it at an integration level because just with the random data and everything, it could be hard to kind of use this with mocking and things like that.
State can be abstract type as a property, get some generate state.
Yeah, so I think the best place would probably be at the unit level. It'd probably be easier just to come up with those different properties, the smaller function that you're trying to test. All right, thank you.
All right, make sure this thing's still working. Thanks again, Saeed. That was great. And next up, we have WebAssembly with Chris. Everybody give it up for Chris. There you go.
Thanks, Antonio. Hello, everybody. I'm Chris. If you don't know me, I work here at IDX. I'm the product manager, so I'm not really like in the code day to day. WebAssembly is something completely new to me. It was something that is super interesting to me, and it's still kind of experimental, but it's come a long way. Before I get started, Google I/O, they have a ton of, they have a couple videos on WebAssembly. I highly recommend watching those. If you're interested, shoot me an email. I'll get you some links. So, anyways, who knows what WebAssembly is? Show of hands. Ryan does. Does anybody else? He knows as well. Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay. So we got two people. That's going to make this super easy. All right. So WebAssembly is a way of taking code written in other languages and targeting the browser. So what does that mean? It means that you can run code on the browser at near native speeds. It's not JavaScript. Right now it kind of is. There's this kind of like weird middleman thing, but basically, yeah, it's a native experience in your browser targeted from, right now it's C and C++. So why use WebAssembly? So obviously there's benefits to having that native speed. High performant apps, video games, video editors, any sort of thing that takes any sort of CPU kind of power to function. So right now JavaScript's kind of used in this way of like one size fits all. It's not necessarily the best kind of tool for some of these jobs. So there's this huge ecosystem of C and C++ programs that are kind of like left out of the web kind of ecosystem currently. What this does is it allows them to bring their apps into the browser and target all the browsers, because there is compatibility across the board for Edge, Safari, Firefox, as well as Chrome. So it's not, the web is open, so it's not a walled garden. You're not dealing with app stores. You're not dealing with different OS distributions. And yeah, for some reason, is it possible to scroll down? Because I guess I can look it up real quick. So C and C++ have great tooling. So you get access to all that. WebAssembly has, like I said, the near performance speed of native. It's currently at about 1.2 times the speed of native, which is pretty close. It's constantly being optimized, so it's going to get faster and faster as time goes on. Mozilla is kind of dragging it forward, but Google, the V8 engine, as well as the Chakra engine on the Edge side, they're constantly optimizing it. So the two things you can't see down here is security and privacy. They're rock solid. They're actually better than, say, C or C++. The stack execution is actually kept separate from your WebAssembly program, so you can't, you're not dealing with like stack overflows. You're not dealing with everything being in the stack. So let's see here. There's asm.js, which is kind of that middleman that I was talking about. It was created as kind of a temporary solution to the problem of JavaScript just being terrible at performance. Basically what asm.js does is you have a hinted types. So basically it's an integer, so it can convert it over to machine code in the JIT compiler much faster, thus it runs faster. So let's go to the next one. All right. Right. So we've been here before. There's Java applets, there's Flash. They're terrible. We all know they're terrible. We don't use them anymore. Browser plugins suck, just straight up. They're hard to sandbox. there's this loose sandboxing that happens, but there's constant security holes, constant exploits, and dealing with it across all the different browsers. They don't function the same. They don't interact with the web APIs the same, so every browser is pretty much a crapshoot in terms of the browser plugins. You also have to install them, which is a terrible user experience. And mobile phones don't even give you the option to install extensions easily anyway. You might be able to with some of your mobile browsers, and you might be able to get some of those plugins, but overall the ecosystem is just terrible. So that's why we're not using browser plugins anymore, and why the whole industry has kind of moved away from it, because it's seriously just terrible. ASM.js, it's pretty good. The performance is much better than just plain JavaScript, but it's still just JavaScript. So there's limitations in terms of when it's compiled, it's still compiled in the browser. So you're still running into issues of wasting CPU cycles on actually compiling that code in JIT, whereas kind of WebAssembly solves that because you compile ahead of time. So I'll look at my bullet points just to make sure I'm not leaving anything out. WebAssembly is smaller than ASM.js, so once again, small footprint makes it really nice for downloading and loading up an application. Let's see here. The battery drain on the CPU cycles, so ASM.js isn't exactly ideal for mobile because it does use those additional cycles, so it has the potential to drain your battery. It can be used as a polyfill though, so you develop a Wasm or WebAssembly application in the future, you could backport it to all the unsupported browsers using ASM.js as a polyfill, potentially anyway. There's all sorts of technologies already using ASM.js. I believe Unity is one of those, so WebGL. We're already seeing some really cool stuff out of the performance side on the browsers. So let me see here. All right. All right, so here's a little history on browser performance. It's mostly on the JS side. So JS was created in 1995. It didn't have a JIT setup. That was added later in 2008. And you can kind of see this flat line all the way up until 2008. JavaScript was just terrible. It was slow. It sucked. It was a pain in the ass to deal with. As soon as we introduced this JIT compiler, we start seeing this kind of hockey stick effect where, code that's repeated doesn't need to be interpreted over and over again, so it becomes more efficient, and you start seeing more and more efficiencies, and eventually, JavaScript gets to this point where even you're starting to see it on the server with Node, and that's kind of outside the browser, but it's still kind of really cool to see where JavaScript has kind of evolved from, and WebAssembly doesn't necessarily like shift gears from JavaScript. It actually integrates very well with JavaScript, so. And that's kind of where we're going in the future. So here's an example. This is Wasm Dsp. It's just a demo. Basically, you watch this flower kind of do its thing. It opens up. It's beautiful. You can apply filters to it, similar to like Photoshop or iMovie or whatever else you're using. And you can see how fast it compiles or how fast it renders that versus in WebAssembly versus JavaScript. You can kind of see these numbers here. It's 4 times faster than JavaScript, straight up. So it's blazing fast. It's just showing how performant WebAssembly is versus JavaScript. Just having that native speed is so nice. So, do you still need to know JavaScript? Yes. Basically, they work hand in hand. JavaScript can communicate with WebAssembly, and WebAssembly can make calls to JavaScript as well. That's really how WebAssembly deals with the browser APIs in general. Any DOM manipulations, any sort of, the HTML5 APIs, any of the other web APIs, you're generally accessing those through JavaScript. So WebAssembly is kind of your driver. It controls what's going on. It's super fast, but ultimately when you need it, you can drop down to JavaScript and use JavaScript. And they play very well together. So the current state of WebAssembly is it's supported by all 4 browsers. Some of them are behind flags, Chrome specifically. I think they actually changed that recently because we did a couple tests and it was just on by default. I did not know Safari had a technical preview with it enabled, but Mozilla is really the one that's kind of, like I said, kind of dragged it out and kept it going. So obviously Firefox has support and Edge has support as well. So, and that's it. So, do we have any questions?
You have some C code.
Mhm.
Where does that sit? And then when the compiled result, where does that sit in terms of on your computer? Which you have it
So you would use like LLVM to compile it to a Wasm file, and then your browser would load that Wasm file. So you just use LLVM, just like you would.
the Wasm file on your computer.
Yeah. Mhm. So the question was, I believe it was, how does that file live on your computer if you're compiling from a C file to a WebAssembly file?
The various artifacts and products from the source code on your computer to something in some browser somewhere and something on some server somewhere.
Yeah.
And
It functions basically the same way as, say, targeting certain architecture in C using your compiler. So like I said, it's through LLVM. Basically, what was I going to say? Since you're targeting just Wasm specifically, it kind of converts it on the fly for you. But it uses that. It's an IR. I can't remember. It's intermediary. I can't remember the R in it, but basically it translates it into a format that can work with any of the architectures, and then your front end kind of deals with, either translating it out to Linux or whatever architecture you're using, or with the case of WebAssembly, the web basically.
so you make the WebAssembly compiled product,
Mm-hmm.
and then you put it on their server just like you would
Yep.
put HTML code or JavaScript.
Yeah, exactly.
Then when the browser uses a website that has this built into it,
Mhm.
it is bringing up
Yeah.
JavaScript that then pulls in.
No, it doesn't use JavaScript at all. The browser actually uses the WebAssembly files, which are directly compiled already. So it doesn't have to do any compilation, whereas that's what JavaScript does basically. It's a interpreted language, so it compiles on the fly. This is already pre-compiled.
HTML has no HTML.
HTML is separate. You're interacting with the DOM through JavaScript using WebAssembly, and you can make calls to JavaScript and from JavaScript basically.
So when you put a URL into your browser,
Mhm.
what happens? It tells the server to serve up this.
It's very similar to, say, JavaScript. It loads up the JavaScript, but it doesn't do any sort of interpretation. It's already pre-compiled, so it's off and running at that point. So it's super fast.
Source statement in an HTML file that has a pointer to one of these.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And right now it's just an MVP. They have a whole lot of kind of products planned for it going forward, like streaming. You can actually load Wasm files from within Wasm, so you can basically stream programs to yourself using this. And that's still very early in the kind of experimental phase, but yeah, it's very similar. You still have to load it as a resource, but your browser just takes it off and runs like it's a C program basically. So, yeah. No, not currently. Google, like I said, they did a really good talk on it today. I think there's a couple sites. They're probably just small little demo sites. I don't think anyone's really using it in production yet, though. Because of the browser support, it's still kind of hidden behind technical previews and flags that you have to set manually. So it's still very much just in development mode. So, all right. Anybody else? Yes, so basically it could be any language. They're even talking about having JavaScript, where you can use JavaScript, compile that to Wasm, and then control JavaScript using it. Or it's just kind of this weird pipeline situation, but basically, it's all dependent on your tool set. You can compile from basically any language, so, yeah. Right. Probably. What's that? Let me actually look that up real quick, because it's not runtime. It's like.
And to answer your question, sorry, it's just a different type of scripts.
Intermediate representation Yeah. So that's what it is. Bytecode, yes. Yeah. Yeah, you still have to load it, so. Mhm. Yeah.
Absolutely all over it. We've been there.
Yeah, this is, like I said, this is all still super experimental. There's probably going to be some really stuff coming out here sooner than later. Google I/O had a specific talk on this. So, and now all 4 browsers actually support it. They had MVP support, I believe, February 2016. And now they're actually moving forward with getting this in all of the browsers and getting it enabled by default. So once that happens, you're going to see this everywhere. So.
Once there's a JavaScript compiler,
Mhm.
JavaScript programmers, without changing anything, could just have their code run, right?
Yep.
Do the exact thing they do now, except have one other button or
Mhm.
pipelining process.
Yeah, you would set up your whatever your build tools are to basically just compile out to the same format. I have no idea. I've never even tried it. That is a very good question, and I have no idea. Well, I know that with ASM.js right now, the GIT kind of handles the compilation up until it's ready. So maybe it just goes through that step and just gets it to that state. I don't know. So I really have no idea on the JavaScript side. I think that's super experimental. Right now, this is really just C and C++. So yeah, and to, you know, I haven't really touched C or C++ in a long time. I've done a little bit with C, but I haven't really touched it since college. So I'm not really a super expert on that side of things, but I know Unity automatically will port out to the web already. So.
The big wrinkle is a lot of stuff in C++ won't directly translate because it'll depend on system calls and things that aren't available
Mm-hmm.
inside of the browser.
Yeah.
So it's very toy C++, very toy libraries in C++.
Yeah, it's definitely, and that's where all the demos are at right now too. Is, you know, it's all these small projects right now, and they're still figuring out, like I was saying, with the streaming kind of Wasm to Wasm, being able to load programs as you're going. That's still very experimental as well, and that's where we're going to start seeing some really cool stuff. Is once they start adding in more features, but that's still, I don't know how far that off is. You know, this is all still up in the air. At least it's in the browsers. So. Cool. Any other questions? No? All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I'm pretty interested to see where that's going to go too. Come on, Safari. Why are you always behind? So yeah, let's get the next the experimental version. Yeah. The next talk is going to be from Dave. Dave also works here. Come on up, Dave. We're going to be talking. Why don't you tell us what we're going to be talking about?
All right. So my name is Dave, everybody. Thank you. If you don't know me, I also work here at IDX. I primarily work actually with the sister company of IDX, a subsidiary called Agent Evolution, where we just build real estate agent websites using the real estate data provided by IDX. And so I'm primarily just a front-end developer, so I'm not going to get too technical here. I hope that doesn't disappoint anybody. Are we good to go? All right. And so today I'm going to be talking about Google AMP and Facebook Instant Articles. Is anybody familiar with any of these technologies? Has anybody used them, developed on them, or anything? You? Okay, right on. So both of these have actually been out for quite some time. I know Google AMP was about maybe 2 years ago, I want to say. Come on, phone. And then Facebook Instant, again, is also about 2 years ago. But they've gained traction, over the last few months, especially as publishers, especially, have started to realize, the return on investment and how much, investing in these sort of technologies can bring more traffic to their sites. Just because of their mobile technologies, obviously, it's emerging mobile optimized web technologies. So what these do, let's start with Google AMP. Google AMP, it stands for Accelerated Mobile Pages. It's are we? Oh, whoops, I'm fast forwarding on here. Let's go back this way. All right. So first, let's cooperate. Google AMP. So Google AMP is accelerated mobile pages. So it's a Google-backed open source project, and the basically AMP pages. When you are searching on your mobile phone and you search for something, now Google is now highlighting those AMP pages like first in your search results. So you'll see them before you see pages that are not optimized for mobile devices. Which is a good thing, because obviously if you're on mobile and you see something right at the top, you're going to click on that. And so obviously that's going to drive more traffic to your site. And so what the accelerated mobile pages do, they use HTML, but then they also use a subset of HTML that Google has developed that's very similar in the markup and the style, but what it does, it's a stripped down version of an HTML page. It strips out all the unnecessary scripts and just a lot of the fluff that you generally have on a web page, just to make it as small as possible, to get it as fast as possible on a mobile device. And the best thing about that is that because it's a Google-backed project, at this time, it's currently, if you have an AMP page, all those pages are cached by Google's AMP CDN, AMP cache. So you're not serving those pages yourself. You don't have to pay for the bandwidth. Google is taking care of all of that for you. So you get better speed, better reliability. Even if your site goes down, your AMP page is still going to load. So that's a great thing. And again, because that's speed matters. Faster is always better, especially on mobile. I've got some stats here where some publishers have published some very interesting stats about what they've seen just by implementing these accelerated mobile pages. So you can see the Washington Post has seen a 23% increase in mobile search users who return within 7 days. Gizmodo, I'm sure you're familiar with, a 50% increase in impressions. I think that's ad impressions. So they get even more ad views on their pages, even more, even more visits, just because they're first in the search results and their pages load even faster. And then Wired, again, has seen a 25% increase in click-through rates from search results and click-through rates on ads by huge amounts, 63%. So you can see the graph here. We've got 80% higher viewability rates. 90% are seeing greater engagement with click-through rates and higher CPMs. And of course, it's growing in adoption. At the recent Google I/O conference, just a couple weeks ago, it was Google announced that they've now have over 2 billion AMP pages that they're hosting on over 900,000 domains. And they also announced that because they've made some improvements on the AMP cache, I'm not sure why these bullet points aren't loading. I've got bullet points here. Because they've made improvements into their AMP caching, their CDN, they've got increased server-side processing. They're using Brotli compression for an even smaller document size. And then they've done some really great image bandwidth reduction, so that they're reducing the image sizes by as much as 50% by just removing extra metadata and compressing and anything else that they can do. So it's a great thing. Now let's see. So now if you're interested in getting started with AMP pages or accelerated mobile pages, AMP pages is kind of redundant, so it's AMP. AMP does require a separate web page be created. You can't just use a regular web page. You actually have to write a separate document with separate markup. And on that separate page, you have to then identify that that is an AMP page using a link rel in the document head, and then also you have to use the link rel on the canonical page, and then you also have to on the AMP page link back to the canonical page. The accelerated mobile pages, they also have to use schema.org. Is anybody familiar with schema at all? No? Yeah. Okay, schema is basically, it's microdata. It basically, what it does is when search engines are crawling your site, and rather than having to parse that data and figure out what your site is about, you basically tell them what it's about using just very, very specific, very defined properties. So with this AMP pages, currently at this time, with schema, you have certain document types. Currently, right now, the only ones that are supported by AMP are article, news article, and blog posting. There are dozens others, but these are the only ones that are currently supported. And that's obviously because, it's accelerated mobile pages. It's really more for like timely news, like timely articles, things that are not, evergreen, right? Things that are not, things that don't change that often are not really AMP eligible. Let's see. And with AMP pages, so everything's all in a single page. You can't really have any external resources in that page unless there are some exceptions. If you're using the Google or the AMP cache, there are some AMP scripts you can use for ads, and I think it's mostly ads at this point. And let's see. So everything, like I said, it has to be in the same document. So all CSS, all your styling, everything, it all has to be in the document head, all in the same document. External or any custom written JavaScript is not allowed. So yeah, there are some caveats to implementing it, but again, that's just all in the name of speed and all in the name of making everything as small as possible and serving it as fast as possible. So really, just to get started, I didn't have too many code examples because I didn't want to get too much in depth here, because I'm also covering something else, the Facebook Instant. But if you want to check it out, they've got some great websites. AMP Project is the main Google site that has guides and specs about the project. That's ampproject.org. If you want to see some examples, some code samples and demos, we got ampbyexample.com. And if anyone is using WordPress, any WordPress fans here? Yes? No? Come on, get on board. WordPress is my thing. That's my primary focus. So, but if you are using WordPress, there's a plugin that you can use, and it's pretty much plug and play. It's really simple to implement. And if you are using WordPress, there's some links there on the WordPress.org repository, GitHub, and yeah, it's cut off there. But basically, only posts are supported out of the box. But if you're using WordPress and you have some custom post types, you can add support for that with some filters and templates. So that's basically Google AMP in a nutshell. Like I said, if you want to dig into it more, that ampproject.org is a great website to learn more about it. All right, next topic is Facebook Instant articles. Anybody use Facebook? Has anybody seen a Facebook Instant article? Whereas, so Facebook, whoops, let's go back. So Facebook Instant articles are very similar to AMP pages. You may have seen if you're on Facebook a lot and you read a news article, it's when you click on a link, you don't have to wait for an entire website to load. It's Facebook Instant articles are just like the Google AMP pages, AMP. They're cached by Facebook. So again, it's kind of a benefit to you because it's right there. It's super quick, and you don't have to pay for bandwidth. But the drawback to that is Facebook Instant articles are only available on Facebook. So if you have a Facebook page, or your customers or clients have a Facebook page, they would benefit from having Facebook Instant articles. Right, you'd only see it if you're on the mobile app in Facebook. Yeah. You don't see them. No. Right, it's only for mobile. Yeah, at this time. Well, it's partly because of the formatting, because again, it's a stripped-down version of a full web page, and so if you're on a desktop, having a stripped-down version is not really the right, environment to be viewing a mobile page. So some stats on that: they're easily shareable within Facebook. It's apparently shared 30% more than any other web page in Facebook app on average. Facebook comments are automatically added to each Facebook Instant article. You don't have to add in Facebook comments or anything, and then those are, it just increases engagement with any brands. And again, some more stats here. So Facebook Instant pages are 10 times faster than standard mobile web articles. These are all stats from instantarticles.fb.com if you want to visit that and find out more about Facebook Instant. They're 20% more, 20%, they're read on average 20% more than any other web page. And interestingly, 70% are less likely to abandon reading the article just because it loads so much quicker. And again, we have some caveats because it's Facebook. And so as I mentioned, it requires a Facebook page. It can't be used with any personal profile. If you do set it up, before you're able to publish any Facebook Instant article, you have to go through a review process with it's a human reviewing it, and it takes around 2 to 5 days to get the approval before you can actually publish them. It does use HTML, standard HTML, unlike AMP pages. However, not all HTML markup is valid for Facebook Instant. And the downside to that is that any content you have that might be wrapped in an invalid HTML element, it's just completely ignored and you don't see it. So you have to fix that some way or another, either changing your markup or there's other ways around that, but I won't get too much into depth to that right now. And then we got it cut off here again, sorry about that. But then articles can be submitted to Facebook in one of two ways, and that's either through an RSS feed, which would be a custom RSS feed with your custom Facebook Instant markup, or they have an API where you can submit articles that way. Right. And some more code stuffs. So right there we've got developers.facebook.com, long URL. That's all the documentation you need to get it up and running. If you're interested in playing around with it, they've got an SDK on GitHub. Just search for it there. It's on their Facebook's GitHub. And again, I'm a WordPress fan, so if you're using WordPress, Automatic and FB together have actually developed a plugin to really implement it really easily. I've got the URLs there, and again, it's cut off. Sorry about that. So again, with AMP pages, it's only posts are supported out of the box, but if you have a custom post type, those can be added with a filter and some custom templates. And just today, actually, this is some breaking news. Facebook announced that their PHP SDK now offers an extension so that if you have a Facebook Instant article with markup that you've already created, they have an extension that will also now create an AMP page for you, so you don't have to create both of them at the same time. You just have to create one, and this will automatically convert it for you. And another advantage to that is it will also create an Apple News article for you, which is very similar to these other technologies, but I haven't played too much with Apple News. But their new SDK extension will actually help you just write one document and convert it into three different formats, basically. Or, well, convert it into 2 different formats, but you get 3 formats. So, and then we've got some URLs there. The news article that came out today. I had to throw this slide in at the last minute because I just saw the news today. And I think that's, I think I ran through that pretty quick. Sorry about that, but had a lot to go over. If you guys have any questions, let me know.
How that Facebook fake news gets made up?
Is that how the Facebook fake news gets made up?
I mean, they have a review.
I'm sure you can publish anything you want, really. Yeah.
It makes sense.
Right, exactly.
I didn't know why it was a big deal. Who does that? Page?
Right, right.
Has the adoption rate been any different, AMP versus instant articles?
It's a great question. So yeah, Facebook, I think the adoption rate is a little bit slower. Publishers are now finally catching up to the idea. They're seeing the value of being on Facebook because it's a silo and it's such a small segment, a small user base. I mean, it's not a small user base, Facebook, obviously, but it's smaller than Google. And so publishers, I think, were quick to jump on the Google AMP bandwagon first, so that picked up a lot more adoption a lot more quickly. But now people are starting to see the advantage of Facebook and being in there as well. Yeah.
Have you seen anybody that will sit in the middle and create? I mean, you said on making around the news. Also,
Right.
So, I mean, are those same guys going to probably build something that allows all three of them? Because they all kind of seem like the same.
Right, they are kind of very similar competing technologies. Yeah, I think Google is the only one that's actually open source project. Yeah, the other ones are very much, well, I don't know if the Facebook one, no, I think it's still developed by Facebook. It's not necessarily open source. Although their SDK is open source, but yeah. Yeah.
So you're saying that these articles are cached by these other companies?
Right.
How long the cache takes place if you were to like update your page or your page or something?
How long is the? Yeah, these pages are cached by the AMP is cached by Google's AMP cache. Facebook Instant is cached by Facebook. I don't really know. I know they do clear the cache occasionally, but in Facebook there is a way to manually clear the cache if you have to, if something does change. With AMP, I think it will automatically update as Google crawls your site. Yeah.
Do they generally recommend using the RSS feed or the API?
If you look at their website, was it fb.instantarticles.com or instant, yeah, something like that. I'm sorry, what was the question again?
RSS.
Yeah, no, RSS is actually the first option on that page. It's the first one, so I don't know whether they recommend it. It's the easiest one, at least for me, it was the easiest to get up and running. But you could do it either way. I don't think there's one recommended way. The AMP page would go to the brand site. Yeah. But again, that should be cached by Google's AMP cache. So it's not necessarily your site, but it's not going to Facebook either.
So is that Facebook's way of getting people to adopt instant articles?
I think so, yeah. Trying to get everybody on board with them first, yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I forgot.
Do you know, so you can't use any external JavaScript? Do you know, can you have analytics on these pages?
Great question. Can you use any external libraries? Or can you use ad tracking or analytics tracking? So actually with both of them, they do have special markup and tags that you can use to insert analytics and ads. Both of them, obviously, because that's their business, right? Yeah.
Part of the reason, go ahead. Part of the reason that the web's so fat is because there's all this advertising going on
Right.
the website. So these are just two approaches to have basically an ad runtime that happens to show you content. Like they've reduced the fat of all the web page, of all the marketing and the analytics that come with your web page. And they say, fine, we'll track all this stuff for you and get you back to the actual content you want. I don't know. It just seems to be,
Essentially, yeah.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
because where does because the value add for these companies,
It's huge.
the advertising is to get that information
Yeah.
back. And that's why
Right.
on a standard web page it has 2 megabytes of
Mm-hmm.
do a lot of the things that they're doing now he's doing it in runtime, right?
Right. Yeah. Good point.
It just we're going back to the square, you know.
Right. It's kind of, yeah. I get your point. Yeah. There are some downsides. Again, it's evolving every day. And we'll just see where it goes, I guess. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I didn't say that.
Remember advertising, they allow scripts in place, or at least some sort of advertising, but is it just their advertising that you're allowing? Like, is Facebook only allowed on Facebook ads and Google only allowed on Google?
No. They both allow any type of analytics tracking. I forgot to repeat the question. Yeah. Do they allow any other analytics and/or ad tracking within those pages? I know Facebook does allow. They both allow any kind of analytics tracking.
I'm playing specifically ads. So if
Right.
it's a cache page, and you serve them a cache page with a single ad in it,
Mm-hmm.
all they're ever going to cache is going to show is that ad.
Well, it won't be a single ad. It will be a dynamic ad. But yeah, it won't be a single ad cached. It would be a dynamic ad. It would change per page load. However, I'm not really certain about that. I didn't delve too much into the advertising and aspect of that.
I know that I've seen Google ads on Facebook Instant article pages.
Yeah.
So they'll allow analytics. They'll probably allow. Or I know for a fact they allow Google ads.
Right.
Like all those clickbait stories, that's all ads.
That's right.
Yeah, that's all AdSense. Facebook ads only get served within Facebook, not on external pages.
True.
Right?
True.
And so Facebook, if they're serving an instant article, you're never leaving the app because you're in the browser within the app. So that's what's advantageous to them. Right? So they don't care if you're serving Google ads on your instant article page.
Yeah. Good point. Any other questions? I think I saw another hand. No. Nope. All right. Cool. Right on.
All right, and that's it, everybody. That's all our talks. Thanks again for everybody showing up. If you have more questions, these guys I think are hanging around for a little bit. Feel free to bother them with lots more questions. They really like it. They told me so.
Hey,
All right.
real quick question to the audience. Is anybody here familiar with like Ethereum or like smart contracts or decentralized apps? Okay.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for coming.